are beautiful numbers that we love, and they are called perfect squares. So 64 and 81 being perfect squares. So I do not want to try and factor this with multiplying 64 and 81, and the rest of you need to be quiet while I'm talking. So when I'm looking at this, one of the first things I recognize is this is kind of that pattern where I have a squared. And I'm going to check if it gives me that middle term, 2ab. Now this one in 17, this is a minus. And then this is a plus b squared. So I have two perfect squares. And if I didn't recognize that pattern, the pattern is that a, since this is a minus, minus b squared. And I just have to check the middle term. So the square root of 64, 8x. The square root of 81 plus 9. Someone said, can I write this with two 8x plus 9s? That works. Can you put this squared? Yes. You are now checking, except I don't want a plus here. I want this to be a minus. When I multiply these two, it gives me negative 72x. And if I double it, making that times 2, I do get negative 144. So if you don't recognize patterns, you might recognize perfect squares as you are looking at numbers. And if you are taking a look on question 30, 31, as I'm looking at 31, one of the first things as I look at problem 31 is I might want to be looking if I have a greatest common factor. And I look at 12, 41, and 35, and I don't really have a greatest common factor. So the first thing that I might be looking at is multiplying to the side, and this is where some of you on yesterday's quiz when you were doing that kind of got stuck. So we're taking 12 times 35, and I can multiply that out, but I might want to think of the prime factors. And I might start with, instead of prime factors, I could say 3 times 4 and 7 times 5. And so now I just want to rearrange those with multiplying. So if I am rearranging them, instead of 35, if I go with 7 times 4, that gives me 28. And I have 15. Is 28 and 15 any way going to get me to negative 41 adding those? No. So now maybe I go with, and I look at a different combinations of numbers. So I go, 5 and 3. And I go, don't want to go 5 and 3, I go 5 and 4. So 5 times 4 gives me 20. 7 times 3 gives me 21. And a little bit of rejoicing because 20 and 21 are going to add to negative 41. If they are both negative, so keep the sign with both of them. So I now split 12, I'm not going to use e, I'm going to put x squared. I'm splitting the 41 to negative 20x, negative 21x, plus 35. So when you start these problems, what I was noticing yesterday, how some of you weren't always keeping this first one and the last one. And when you look at that middle one, these two together, as I look at those, have to add the negative 20x and have to add to give me my middle term here. And some of you, when I looked at your quiz, you weren't splitting it that way. So now I'm going to take a look at this part. So as I am looking at this, Evan, greatest common factor here is 12x squared minus 20x, greatest common factor, 4x. After I factor out a 4x, Laura, what am I looking at being left with? 4x to get 12x squared. 3x. 4x to get negative 20x. I'm going to have what, Brody? 5. Over on this side, Henry, I'm looking for my greatest common factor of negative 21 plus 21x plus 35. So I'm going to go with negative 7. So the reason I want negative 7 is I need this to be a minus, and originally it was a plus. So when I factor out a negative 7, I am then going to have and 3, and I changed it to x instead of e, and I'm going to have now a minus 5. So when I'm writing my final answer, anytime you're asked to factor, it might be 2 parentheses on the test, it might be 3, it might have a greatest common factor out in front, but since they both had 3x minus 5, that's what goes in one of these. And in the other parenthesis is what I'm looking at that was out in front. And so this is the 4x, so I put 4x, and the minus 7. So the mistake that I have some people writing is 3x minus 5 times 3x minus 5, just putting that down. And now you want to check this. Is 3x times 4x give us 12? In this case, e squared, yes. If I look at the last one, negative 5 times negative 7, positive 35. So what I wrote on some of your quizzes, I kind of put these arrows and I was like, did you check this? When I checked the middle term, this is the negative 20x, this is the negative 21x. That does give me negative 41 as you are taking a look at that. So as you are looking at those questions to make sure you're understanding, I think for 30, my hint would be on 30, your greatest common factor is actually 12. So start with factoring that out, divided each by 12 as you are taking a look. 33, as you look at 33, you're asked to find the volume of a box, okay? Volume is going to be length times width times height. So if we start with this, I need to have 3 things multiplied. I know that right away when I look at number 33. So when I look at 33, first thing, I have a greatest common factor, and it is what? 4 and x. That's going to be one of my dimensions, right? Because that's what I'm multiplying. They all have a 4 and an x. If I factor out a 4 and an x, I am now left with 3x squared plus 8x, right? Plus 5. I now want to try and factor this. I'm going to take 3 times 5, which gives me 15, and it has to add to 8. That is the 2 middle terms, right? So I have 4x. Keeping 3x squared, back here I'm putting plus 5. Tristan, tell me what I'm going to write instead of 8x. We're going to write it as how? Plus, what were my 2 factors?
3 and 5.
So I'm going to put plus 3x plus 5x. Next thing, Angus, tell me how I'm factoring greatest common factors here.
5 and 3.
Okay, so in this first one, you're going to factor out anything besides a 3.
3x.
3x. Leaving us, Benson, with?
1x plus 1.
1. As I look at that last part, Caleb, greatest common factor?
5.
So I'm going to put a plus 5. Leaving us with, Caleb?
X plus 1.
X plus 1. So what are my factors? One factor is 4x. That'd be like my length. What's the next factor that I'm multiplying it by? X plus 1. That's going to be maybe my width or my height, however you want to do it. The last one is 3x plus 5. Those are the 3 dimensions. It is April 4th, so Thursday, 4/4. Thursday. So there are 60 points possible, but it will be out of 100%. So like when I put your score in, it's going to be 60 points is considered 100%, right? So there's 60 points possible on the test. The first thing you are going to see is you're going to be asked to add and subtract. So when you start the homework on the chapter review that you're doing from page 536, these are the first couple questions. This will be a total of 8 points total. 2 questions where you add and subtract. That's where you decide to add like terms. You have to keep it in descending order. Remember, this was on the quiz where we were naming our different polynomials with the binomials, trinomials. The second standard that you are going to see on the test, as you see on the poster, is I can multiply polynomials. So it'll be 6 questions. Each one, or a total of 24 points. This could be as simple as the distributive property. It could be the special cases. It could be 2 polynomials, and you have to multiply it out. Couldn't you do the box method? Yes. Can you do the FOIL or the parentheses, that double distributive? Some of you, this is where you like doing that box method, right? Or that table method it's sometimes called. This is where you might do the FOIL, you do the distributive property, you show those arrows. Each one is going to be worth 4 points. The last standard is I can rewrite it by factoring. That's what we've been working on from lesson H6 on, or H5 on, something like that. I think H5 through H8 that we've done. That's all of those lessons. So usually it might be a binomial, it could be a trinomial, there could be 4 polynomials. Those are those special cases of the differences at a squared. The other special case is when you have it factored as a plus b squared, right? Or if you have an a minus b squared, right? The difference of squares, oh, what did that look like? That was when we had something like a plus b, a minus b, like you were doing in your homework last night. This will be another 28 points. So each question on the test, pretty much a 4-point question that you are taking a look at. Okay. As you look at this, right before each one, it kind of gives you this quick review. So not talking right now. So as you look at those quick reviews, to make sure you're kind of reading through, it's kind of like the notes, and then they're giving you examples. Well, what's the difference? Oh, make sure you find opposite of all of these, and then they group them with like terms. So as you're doing the problem, 7 to 77 odd on this, make sure you take a look at that quick review on each part. It kind of is giving you what you need to be looking at for each one. As you take a look, quiet please, as you take a look going through all of those, it's pretty good as to what is on the test. The other thing that I would recommend is that on Pearson, I put up all of the quizzes for the unit. I put the lesson test. The lesson test is pretty long, but again, it's Thursdays when we're taking the test. So if you need to go back and you know that you are struggling with 8A, but 8.6 was the one that you really struggled the most with, like that AC method and doing those, or the special cases. So go to the quiz, take a look at it. As you look at that quiz, you're going to be taking it. They're wanting you, they're multiple choice, so it's going to be nice. You'll know if you get the right answer or not. So you can take a look at those also. So if you are struggling, that's what I would recommend you take the time to do.